Hi guys, so I'm back with another video today where we're going to be creating this text reveal effect when we load our page. It will work for all like kind of headings on the page where we apply this to using the intersection observer, and it'll always reset when they leave the viewport as well. So you can see the animation is always re-triggered when we scroll into the relevant section of the page. Okay, so we're using this kind of animate these random characters, so we can obviously change the animation time here. So for example, I could set this to 55, so this frame, which we'll look at in the video, and you can see when we do that, the animation goes on a bit longer. Okay, so you can tweak the frames to your taste, but yeah, it's quite a cool animation effect, I think. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get going. Thanks, guys. Okay guys, so to get started, as usual, we've just got the three usual files. We have the index.html file here, a style.css and an app.js file. You can see I've pre-completed the index.html and the style.css just to save time. So just to go over the HTML quickly, we've just got the usual HTML5 boilerplate here. In the header, we've just added these three link tags here, and this is just for the Inter Google font. So I've just copied over these link tags here and pasted them in the header. And you can see we have another link tag, which is linking to our style.css file as well. Coming into the body, I've just got three separate sections here. Each one contains a H1 tag. The first one is just my name. And because it's got a space in, I'm using this and NBSP, and this will just create a space within the text for HTML. Okay, we need that just to get this effect working for when you have multiple words in your header. And the other headers I have here is just about and contact. And finally, at the bottom of this, the body, we're just linking to our app.js file using this script tag with the source attribute here. Coming into the style.css, again, there's not a lot going on here really. We've just removed the default margin and padding and box size and border box. I've added this font family Inter here as well, you can see up here. I've set the font weight to 400 just to make it, lighten up the weight a bit, make it less bold. Letter spacing, I've just closed the gap as well between the letters just to make them closer together. I've set it to minus 0.08 EM. And I've just set the colour to this kind of darkish grey, so RGB 909090. Section, so we have these three sections as I mentioned before, so each section will be position relative, and we'll position those left 50% and then translate those to minus 50 just so they're centralized on the screen, and we're going to set them to a width of 95%. Okay, so we have around 2.5% white space on each side of the section, and we're just setting the height to 100 viewport height. So if I just do a border, we'll just say 1 pixel, solid black, and if we just open this in live server just so you can see what we're working with these sections. Okay, so you can see they're 100 viewport height, so that means they'll fill the screen vertically. Okay, and this will just allow us to get that kind of or animate on scroll effect we're going to be implementing with the intersection observer in JavaScript. Okay, so I'll just remove that for now. I don't need that anymore. That border. H1, I've just positioned these absolute to the bottom, 1 rem. And then we're just using a font size of 13 viewport widths here. And we're using this clamp function. So as this will grab the screen, we want to set the maximum size it can go up to be 100 pixels and the smallest size to be 1 pixel, sorry. And we're starting off the opacity initially at 0, okay? We don't want to see our headers first because we're obviously going to bring these in with this text reveal animation effect we're going to implement with JavaScript. Okay, and then for the spans, we're just displaying them with inline block. That's very important for this animation. Transform with translate X minus 10 pixels. So we're just moving to the left by 10 pixels so we can translate them in. We set it again with the span, we'll set the initial opacity to 0, and then we're just applying the transition or the animation time effects here. So for the opacity, we want the transition effect to last 0.3 seconds, ease in, ease out. And we want the transform animation to last again. You can adjust these how you want to suit you really, but I've just gone for the same time and again, ease in, ease out. Okay, so let's go to the JavaScript now. The first we need to do is just create an empty array. So I'm going to say const, and we're just going to say h1 elements equals, and we're going to just say an empty array there, like so. And then we want to do is get all of our h1 elements on the page. Okay, so we're going to say const. So this h1 elements is we're basically going to create a class called header, and this is going to contain each instance of our header class, okay, which will contain the animation effects. You'll see what I mean shortly. So we're just going to create a new h1 array here, and we're going to use the spread operator here within an array, and we're just going to say document.query selector all, and we just want to select the h1 element. Okay, so just say h1 here, like so. So now if I console.log the h1 array, you should see that we get each of our headers, our 3 headers. Okay, console comes here, you see our array, and we get each of our headers listed there. Okay, so that's working good. Now the next thing we want to do under this is I want to create a special character string array. Okay, so we're going to say special chars, like so, and that is going to going to use another array here, going to use the spread operator again, and this time we're just going to create a string of loads of special characters, so exclamation marks, @ symbols, pound symbols, just any kind of, or any characters you want really. I'm just going on the top of my keyboard here and do some square brackets, some curly braces. Okay, that should do for now. And then I'm also just going to have some letters here as well, so I'll just go along the keyboard. And then after this, we just want to use the split method. So we're going to say it's a string method built into JavaScript, which just split these letters up, all these characters, into separate array, indexes of the array. Okay, so now if we console.log the special chars, you'll see we have our array of each of our characters in a separate index of the array. Okay, and this is what's going to be used to create that kind of random text reveal effect. Okay, so now, as I said before, we're going to create the class of header, and this is going to have a constructor first, and what this is going to take in is an ID initially, as well as the element itself. Okay, and then we're going to set this .id to equal the ID we pass in when we create a new instance. We're going to set the index to equal 0 initially, so say this .idx equals 0, this .frame equals 0, and you'll see why we're using index and frame shortly. We're going to set this .element equals element, so that's the element we pass in to the constructor, and then we're going to say this .element .class name, and we're going to just take that ID. So we use a template literal here, and we'll just say this .id, like so. We can just actually say the ID, we don't need to use this keyword because we pass that into the constructor here, like so. Okay, and then what we're going to say here is this .original string. So we need the original string so we know what we're working with, so we can obviously bring in the, once the animation is complete, we want it to reveal the original string that we have. So we're just going to say here, element .inner text, like so. And then we're just going to set an inner HTML as well, so inner HTML, and that's going to equal, we'll just say a blank string for now, and then we're also going to say this .intersecting, and this is what the we're going to use the intersection observer for. This will just basically say if the element is on our screen or if it's not. If it is on our screen, if it's in the viewport, then that will be set to true, otherwise it will be set to false. So we're going to set it to false initially when we create our instance. And then we're also just going to say a final function here called this.create spans, and this will be a method that's built into this class. Okay, so let's create that now actually. We can come in here, we'll say create spans, and here we're just going to say for let I equal 0. So we're going to do a for loop here. We're going to loop through the original string variable that we pass in when we create our instance. So I'll say whilst I is less than original string dot length, then we're just going to increment by 1, so I++, and then we're just going to say here, we're going to get our inner HTML, this.inner HTML plus equals, and we're going to use the template literal here. We're going to create a span tag, so obviously we're going to create a span for each letter of our original string. So here we can just say a template literal here, we'll just say this.original string, take the I iteration of that, And then we just need to close this span tag down. So we'll just say span. Okay, so we're just adding for each letter, we're just wrapping it in a span element and then pushing it to our inner HTML string. Okay, and then so what we can do after that is we're just going to say we're going to get our element, and we're going to set the inner HTML. So this.elements.inner HTML, and that's going to equal this dot inner HTML, like so. And then finally for this, we're just going to say this dot spans next. Okay, we want to get all the span elements and we want to put them into a variable in our instance. So we'll just say this dot spans equals, again we use a spread operator here, we'll say this dot element dot query selector all, and we want to select all the span elements within the instance element. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So now what we can do here, we'll just say we can say h1 elements, and we can say, so that h1 elements is h1 array, sorry, h1 array dot for each. We'll just say for each header that we pass in, or that's in that array, we're just going to say h1 elements. We'll get our h1 elements, and then we'll say, and we also just want to pass in the index here as well, like so. And we're just going to say pass that index in there, and that's just going to equal a new instance of the header. Okay, and then again for the ID we'll just pass in the index again, and for the element we'll just say header, which is the initial header element that we pass in through this for each. Okay, so now if we go to our elements, we should see you can see here, so for this first one, it's just my name, you can see each instant, well this h1, we have all these span elements now, and that's what this create span function is doing. It's basically just getting each letter and wrapping it into a separate span tag, and it's next to each other. You can see they're positioned horizontally. That's what that display inline block is doing. Okay, if we didn't have that inline block, you'd see that inline box lets you animate it in, basically. Okay, so it's very important we do that. Okay, so that's it so far. Now, next thing we need to do here is we're just going to say animate. So we want to create an animate function within this, or method in this class instance. And here, so we're just going to have some initial logic. So we're going to say if this dot index is not equal to this dot original string dot length. Okay, so remember we start the index off at 0. So we want to run this animate function whilst this index is not the same size as our string.length, okay, because we want to go through each letter of the string. And we need to say and this dot intersecting. So while it's on the screen, we're just going to say this dot spans next, okay, and then we're just going to say this dot idx dot style dot opacity equals 1. Okay, and then we also want to say, we'll just copy this down because we also just need to, obviously with our spans we translated them minus 10 pixels, so we just want to reset the transformation on those. So we can just say dot transform equals, we'll say translate x 0, like so. Okay, so that's that done. The next thing we want to do here is we're just going to say, and then we want to do another if statement here. We're going to say if this dot frame, okay, is a mod. We'll say mod. We'll say 35 for now, okay. And if that equals 0, so for each, so for the 35th of each frame, so for each time the frame is incremented by 35, then we're just going to apply this effect that we're going to add in a minute, okay? So we're also going to say here, and this dot spans, and we want to get the index of this instance, so we're passing this dot index dot inner text is not equal to a space, basically. So if we have a letter that we're dealing with, or a character, we need needs to remove that colon there, semicolon. Then what we're going to say in here is this dot spans, then pass this dot index in square brackets there, and we're just going to say dot inner text equals, and then we're just going to use, we're going to get that special chars array that we created with all our different characters, and then we're just going to use the math module next. So we're going to say math.floor, and we're just going to say here math.random next times special chars.length, and this will just pick basically a random character from that array, that special chars array. Okay, so that's that done. And then what else we want to do here in this animate function, let's bring this out slightly so you can see what we're dealing with. We also want to come under here and say if this dot frame, actually we're going to set that to mod 3 for now, because we want the characters to be changed every third frame. Okay, and then what we can say here as well is we obviously want to increase this dot index at a certain point when we're looping through the string. Okay, so we'll say if this dot frame mod 35 equals 0, and this dot frame is not equal to 0. Okay, so we don't want to do this from the from when we start the animation. Then we're just going to say here this dot spans again, take in this dot index, and again we'll say dot inner text, and that's just going to equal this dot original string, and we'll just say this dot idx, and then we're just going to say this dot idx plus plus, like so. Okay, and then coming out of here we're just going to say we want to increment the frame, so say this dot frame plus plus, and then we're also just going to say request animation frame, and then we're just going to say this dot animate, and then we just need to bind the this keyword just so it knows which instance of the header it needs to animate or perform this animate function on. Okay, so we're saying basically this will only request animation frame if this dot index is not equal to the length of the string, and if this this current element is intersecting on the screen. Okay, that's what's going to happen there. Or coming out of this, we can just say else console.log done. And that's it for our animate function. Okay, so what we need to do here now as well is I'm actually just going to come down here. We're going to just create a reset function. So I'll say reset, and this will just basically when we when the element goes out of the viewport, we just want to reset so we can restart the animation once it re-enters the viewport. So to do the reset, we're just going to set the index to equal 0 again, and then we're just going to say this dot frame equals 0, and then we're just going to say this dot intersecting equals false, and then we're just going to select all of the span tags. Okay, so we just say this dot element. Actually, know what we can do here. We can just say this dot span. Sorry, so we just say this dot spans dot for each, and we just say span here, and we can just say span dot style dot opacity equals 0. And then we just translate it back to the initial 10 pixel minus 10 pixels as well. So just say dot transform equals, we'll just say translate x minus 10 pixels, like so. And that should reset our animation. Okay, so now what we need to do here is I'm just going to wrap this here in, we'll just say window.addEventListener. And I just want to listen out for the DOM content loaded here. Okay, so this will just will generate all the effects once all the HTML content has been loaded. So I'll just put that in here. So we'll first just get I'll write this in a timeout function as well. So let's just say it triggers this. There's a slight delay when we load our website and these animations start kicking off. Okay, so I'll just put this in here as well, like so. And then what we need to do now, we're just going to create an intersection observer. Okay, so remember we need to monitor when our elements from the viewport, so that we can then just say, or we can change this intersecting variable to true, so it can then run the animation. Because it needs to be intersecting in order for this animate function to be triggered. Okay, so to do that, I'm just going to create some options first. And these are just going to be some intersection observer options. So we just say root margin, and that's just going to equal 0 pixels for now. And then we're also just going to say threshold, and that's going to be 0.0, like so. Okay, and then we're just going to create a callback next. So we'll say let callback, that's going to equal, we're going to pass in the entries so for each element entry there, and then we can do an arrow function out of that. And here we're just going to say entries dot for each entry. And here we're just going to say if entry dot is intersecting. Okay, this comes with the observer. So there's a variable called is intersecting, which will basically, if this element is on the screen, if this entry is on the screen, then the observer will set this dot is intersecting to true. Okay, so that's what that will do. Then we're just going to say we're going to get our h1 elements array, and then what we're going to do here is we're just going to say plus entry dot target dot class name. Okay, in a square bracket. So we're going to just get, obviously when we create our instance, we set the class name to equal the ID. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. We're just getting that class name in here. So this will be the index of that h1 element array, and then we're just going to say dot intersecting equals true, like so. And then we also just want to do another thing here. We're just going to say animate once that is true. So once that's set to true, then we can run the animate function, like so. Okay, and then else, coming out of that, we can say else here. We just want to reset. So if it's not intersecting, then we just want to reset it all so we can restart the animation. Okay, so we want to call we just want to call this function or this method here. Then we can just say copy this down, and we'll just say reset instead of animate, like so. And then finally, we just need to obviously create our actual observer. Okay, so coming underneath this, I'm just going to say here, let observer equal new intersection observer here. And then we're going to just pass in the callback, as well as the options that we created. So basically these options will just say it gives you the thresholds for when to, determine whether an element is in the viewport or not. And here we've just had no threshold at all. So once the element goes out of the viewport by, 0 pixels, then that's when we'll apply this animation. Okay, so we've done that now. Then what we need to do now is obviously we just need to apply this observer to each of our h1 elements in that array. So we can just say h1 elements dot for each. We'll take in, so for each instance of our h1 element that we created, then we're just going to say observer dot observe, and we're just going to say the instance dot element. Okay, and then underneath that we can just say instance dot element dot style dot opacity, and that's going to equal 1. And now you can see we get that nice cool effect. Okay, so let's just bring this up so we can see. And now when we scroll down, you'll see they all come in, our headers there, like so. And then there'll always be a reset when they leave the viewport. Okay, so it's constantly triggering. Now what we can do as well is if you want to speed up the animation, maybe that's running too long for you, all you have to do is come up to this stop frame, this part in the animation function. We can just bring this down. So if we bring this down to 15, for example, you'll see the animation's a lot quicker. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much how you implement this effect with vanilla JavaScript. This is the best way I could find it. So we create an instance for each of these headers, and they have their own animation effects. They contain their own index numbers and frames, that kind of thing. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of just using the object-oriented programming approach. I kind of like it. It seems like there's a fair bit of code to implement this effect, but it's the best I could come up with for this. So yeah, I hope this helped. Yeah, any questions, please give me a comment or a message and I'll try my best to answer. Yeah, thanks a lot guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.